Hello Poe fans, and welcome back to the Edgar Allan Poe Birthday Celebration. I hope you enjoyed the discussion about the raven and the religious connotations to it. And I think if anything, it proves that Poe was very familiar with the Bible. Now, whether or not he was a religious person, that's a topic for another time. But I hope you enjoyed that. And now we're sort of heading in a different direction. We're heading towards revenge, the Cask of Amontillado. And with me is actor Tony Sandias. Hi, Tony.
Hi, Jeff. Good to be here.
And those of you that have been following the Poe Birthday Celebration over the years will recognize Tony. He's been a staple of many of these celebrations for a number of reasons. One, he's damn good, okay? And the other reason is you love him. And now I've seen many interpretations of the Cask of Amontillado, and this guy does it the best. So I hope you enjoy this presentation. And also remember, coming up next is Berenice, the uncensored version. You don't want to miss that one. But the 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I've borne as best I could. But when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. Tony, what were these insults, and what was what's going on here?
Well, I think very wisely Poe doesn't tell us, because I think if he told us, we'd get bogged down in that, right? He just says, no, you just got to accept this was bad, and it warranted this revenge. I still think we get a little sense that Montresor is a little unhinged. I mean,
a little sensitive because,
boy, I don't know what would warrant the type of revenge that Montresor is seeking for Fortunato. But that's the great thing here. You get these two amazing characters. They're so different. They complement each other. And that's something we don't talk about. I don't think Poe gets enough credit for, and that's the interesting characters that he created. They're all very fully well drawn and distinct and very interesting.
And you're right about one thing. We don't have to know every little detail. Poe doesn't have to tell us everything, because if he told us what the injuries were, it's like, oh, okay.
Right.
But right now we're discussing what could it be? Personal insult. Did Fortunato make fun of his family?
Mm-hmm.
And but 1,000 injuries. Do you think maybe that's a little bit of exaggeration?
It could be, because you get that sense that, as you said, Montresor does seem a little sensitive.
Yes.
And he might be prone to blowing some of these things a little out of proportion.
Yeah. So we'll never know. And I'm glad Poe didn't tell us what these 1,000 injuries were.
But he tells us what what Fortunato's fate is.
Well,
that's really what's horrifying about this story.
That's the beauty of this story, is you don't have to think about what's happening. Poe makes it very clear.
Yeah.
And I've had many people tell me that when they read the story, they felt like yelling out like, Fortunato, turn around, go back, you dummy. Are you stupid? Don't you know what's happening?
Yeah.
And it's a great story.
It gets you very involved.
And
it does.
It no pun intended, but it draws you into the catacombs of Fortunato.
Does. The catacombs.
Exactly. We're in the catacombs of Westminster Hall. Exactly. So what better place to talk about being buried alive than in the catacombs? So are we ready to descend into the catacombs?
Let's do it. Let's descend into the catacombs of Poe's mind and of the Montresors.
And watch your step and watch your head as you walk around.
Yes.
Alrighty.
Okay. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as I best could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length, I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled. But the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortunato, although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared. He prided himself in his connoisseurship in wine. Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity, to practice imposture among the British and Austrian millionaires. In painting and gemmery, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack. But in the matter of old wines he was sincere. In this respect I did not differ from him. I was skillful in the Italian vintages myself, and bought largely whenever I could. It was about dusk one evening, during the supreme madness of the carnival season, that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley. He had on a tightly fitted party-striped dress, and his head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I would never have done wringing his hand. "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you're looking today. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "How?" said he. "Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible! In the middle of carnival?" "I have my doubts, and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. Oh, you were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain." "Amontillado? I have my doubts. Amontillado, and I must satisfy them. Amontillado? As you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucchese. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me, 'Bah, Lucchese cannot tell Amontillado from sherry.' And yet some fools have said that his taste is a match for your own." "Come, let us go." "Whither?" "To your vaults." "My friend, no. I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement. Lucchese." "I have no engagement. Come." "My friend, no. It is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp, and they are encrusted with nitre." "Let us go, nevertheless. The cold is mere nothing. Amontillado? You have been imposed upon, and as for Lucchese, he cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado." Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my arm. Putting on a mask of black silk and drawing a roquelaire closely about my person, I suffered him to hurry me to my palazzo. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded to make merry in honor of the time. I had told them, and I should not return until the morning, and had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance, one and all, as soon as my back was turned. I took from their sconces 2 flambeaux, and giving one to Fortunato, bowed him through several suites of rooms to the archway that led to the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed, and we came at length to the foot of the descent, and stood together on the damp ground of the catacombs of the Montresors. The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. "The pipe! It is farther on, but observe the white webwork which gleams from the cavern walls." He turned towards me and looked into my eyes with 2 filmy orbs that distilled the rheum of intoxication. "Niter?" "Niter. How long have you had that cough?" My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. It is nothing. "Come," I said with decision. "We will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, and admired. Beloved, you are happy, as once I was. You are a man to be missed. For me it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is Lucchese." "Enough!" "The cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough." True. And indeed, I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily, but you should use all proper precaution. A draught of this metic will defend us from the damps. Here, I knocked off the neck of a bottle, which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mould. "Drink," I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly while his bells jingled. "I drink to the buried that repose around us, and I to your long life." He took again my arm, and we proceeded. "These vaults are extensive." The Montresors were a great and numerous family. I forget your arms. A huge human foot d'or. In a field of azure, the foot crushes a serpent rampant whose fangs are embedded in the heel. And the motto? Nemo me impune lacesset. No one insults me with impunity. Good. The wine sparkled in his eyes and the bells jingled. My own fancy grew warm with the medoc. We had passed through walls of piled bones, with casks and puncheons intermingling, into the inmost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortunato by the arm above the elbow. "The nitre, see, it hangs like moss upon the vaults. We are below the riverbed, and the drops of moisture trickle among the bones. Now come, we will go back ere it is too late. Your cough is nothing. Let us go on." But first, another draught of the Medoc. I broke and reached him a flagon of de Grave. He emptied it at a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upwards with a gesticulation I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. You do not comprehend. Not I. Then you are not of the Brotherhood. How? You are not of the Masons. Yes, yes, yes. You? Impossible. A Mason? A Mason. A sign. Show me a sign. It is this, I answered, producing a trowel from beneath the folds of my roquelaire. You jest, he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. But let us proceed to the Amontillado. Be it so. I replaced the trowel beneath the cloak, and again offering my arm, he leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended and passed on, and descending again, arrived at a deep crypt in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeaux rather to glow than to flame. At the most remote end of the crypt there appeared another, less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains piled to the vault overhead in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. 3 sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner, and from the 4th the bones had been thrown down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the wall, thus exposed by the displacing of these bones, we perceived a small interior recess, its depth about 4 feet in width, 3, its height 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no special use within itself, but formed merely the interval between 2 of the colossal supports of the roof of the catacombs. It was backed by one of their circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depths of the recess. Its termination the feeble light did not enable us to see. Proceed. Herein lies the Amontillado. As for Lucchesi, he is an ignoramus, interrupted my friend, as he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more, and I had fettered him to the granite. In its surface were 2 iron staples, distant from each other by about 2 feet horizontally. From one of these depended a small chain, and from the other a padlock. Throwing the links about his waist, it was but the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was too much astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. Pass your hand over the wall, you cannot help but feeling the nitre. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return. No? Then I will leave you. But first I must render you all the little attentions in my power. The Amontillado, said my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. True, the Amontillado. As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones of which I have before spoken, and throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials, and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tier of my masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was a low, moaning cry from deep within the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long and obstinate silence. I laid the second tier and the third and the fourth, and then I heard the furious vibrations of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, that I might hearken to it with more satisfaction, I ceased my labors and sat down upon the bones. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed the trowel and finished without interruption the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh tier. The wall was now nearly upon a level with my breast. I again paused, holding the flambeau over the masonwork, and threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. A succession of loud and shrill screams bursting suddenly from the throat of the chain form seemed to thrust me violently back, and for a brief moment I hesitated. I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope with it about the recess, but the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed. I mocked him. I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamorer grew still. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last and the 11th. There remained but a single stone to be fitted. I plastered it, and I struggled with its weight, and I placed it partially in its destined position. But now there came out of the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, "A very good joke indeed. An excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the palazzo. Over our wine." The Amontillado. Yes, the Amontillado. But is it not getting late? Will they not be awaiting us at the palazzo? The Lady Fortunato and the rest? Let us be gone. Yes, let us be gone. For the love of God, Montresor! Yes, for the love of God. But To these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called aloud, "Fortunato!" No answer. I called again, "Fortunato!" No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. Then came forth in return only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick on the account of the dampness of the catacombs. I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone in its position, and I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old rampart of bones. For half a century, no mortal has disturbed them. In pace requiescat.
Greetings, Poe fans, and welcome back to the Edgar Allan Poe Birthday Celebration. I hope you enjoyed the Cask of Amontillado. I certainly did. I never get tired of reading that story or listening to someone else present it or seeing it acted out. And I really enjoyed that. That was really good. So now we're going in a different direction with Edgar Allan Poe. We are now presenting a theatrical reading of Berenice. This was Poe's first true horror story, written right here in Baltimore in the early 1830s. Now, this story was so gruesome that there were many complaints from the public, and Poe was forced to censor his own story. He removed several paragraphs that the public said, "This is awful, you can't write about this stuff." Now, Tony, what is your take on Berenice?
Well, you know, it feels very modern. Poe had such great insight into psychological issues. I mean, we have a story here with a character who really is obsessed. It feels almost like a obsessive compulsive disorder. And the maladies, the diseases that the narrator and Berenice have also really seem to be the stars of the story. Poe had those diseases, those maladies that would affect both physical and psychological well-being. Hard to figure out where one stopped and the other began.
Exactly.
And both characters, Berenice and Aegeus the narrator, really suffer from that type of issue.
And it's amazing that Poe was in his early 20s and starving. The early 1830s was not a very good time for the Poe family. So here he was in basically poverty, and he wrote this story. And I think as you listen to it, pay attention to the descriptions of the maladies. And I think you'll agree with me that this was pretty amazing for someone in his early 20s to have that kind of knowledge about the human mind and things that could go wrong with it. And that makes me all the more impressed with Poe when I read Berenice. Now, I don't want to give you any spoilers, but I would challenge you, as you listen to the story, try to figure out what was the censored part. Which part did Poe remove because of the complaints? And he defended writing this story by saying he was doing nothing more than giving the public what they wanted. That was the bizarre, the strange, the unusual, and saying that to be appreciated as a writer, people need to read your stories. And funny thing is, Poe promised never to write a story like Berenice again. Did he keep his promise?
No, because I think he knew people really did want him to write stories like that.
Yeah, he knew, and we haven't changed that much, that on one hand, people were disgusted. They were outraged. They were horrified by the subject matter, but they liked reading about it. So on one hand, they were complaining about it, but on the other hand, they wanted more. And Poe certainly gave it to him, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, so I'm glad he didn't keep his promise.
And I'm glad that he only censored this one story and didn't touch the others.
Yes, exactly. Now, after this segment, please come back for the riddle of the Poe toaster. And I will be telling you the true story. There's so much misinformation out there about this unusual visitor to the Poe grave, just like Poe's life itself. There's so much misinformation. So I will be talking to you about the riddle of the Poe toaster. So be sure and come back. Now, are we ready?
Yes.
You're ready?
I'm ready. Let's do some Berenice.
All right, that sounds good. Greetings, Poe fans from around the world. I'm sitting at the Annabelle Lee Tavern in Baltimore, and I'm sitting with someone very special to the Poe world in Baltimore. I want to introduce to you Kurt, the owner of the Annabelle Lee Tavern. Kurt, introduce yourself to people around the world.
Hi, I'm Kurt, owner of the Annabelle Lee Tavern in Baltimore City.
So, we're sitting here and we've been talking about the Annabelle Lee Tavern. And Kurt, I have a question for you. Why the Annabelle Lee Tavern? Why not Joe's Place or Kurt's Place? Why did you choose Annabelle Lee?
Well, I realized we've been open for almost 13 years. In the early 2000s, I always wanted to open my own place. And I realized that while there are a lot of references to Poe in restaurants, there wasn't a Poe-themed place in Baltimore City. And I was like, it was a light bulb moment. And that's what I started to plan specifically for it being a Poe-themed place.
Well, that's great. There are other Poe restaurants around the country, but they're just restaurants with just a Poe name to it. But you have desserts named after Poe's characters in the stories, and I know you have cocktails named after stories and characters in Poe's stories. And I'm 13 years. That's amazing. So when a visitor comes to this establishment, they will see, for example, programs from previous Poe birthday celebrations, artwork in the place, a few skulls here and there, not real ones, and ravens. So this is really a fun place to visit, and the big plus is the food is good. Really, it's different and it's fun, and I mean, you will not get like hot dogs and beans here. I mean, this is really a super place for good food. Now, let me ask you this. What is your favorite Poe story? And I'm assuming you do have a favorite story.
Yes. I like a few of them, but for me, the one that made the biggest impression was the fall of the House of Usher. There's something, the way it draws you in immediately, that during the whole of a dark autumn day, it just immediately pulls you in, and it's very visual. I'm an artist, so he paints a picture in that story. So that's my favorite.
I love that story, and I've been I am the former curator at the Poe House, and I'm not there anymore. But over the so many years I've been there, I reread Poe stories, and it seems like every time I read that story, The Fall of the House of Usher, something jumps out at me that I never saw before, and it's like, I didn't see that before. And I think that's a real tribute to Poe's imagination, that here it is, 2021, and his stories are timeless. And I think of all the hundreds of other writers that Poe was competing with, and they're lost. We don't know who they are, but here's Edgar Allan Poe, 2021, and we are still enthralled with him. And we have the Poe House, and every city that Poe lived in, there's a Poe House or a Poe Museum. But only Baltimore has the Annabelle Lee Tavern. Now, let me ask you a question that I'm sure no one has ever asked you, and this is going to be a tough one. What is your favorite Poe poem?
Let me think about that.
That's a tough one, I know. That's a tough one.
It's the Annabelle Lee, obviously. It's that poem, to me, it was a couple things. I love the poem, but also I feel like everybody explores the scary side, the raven, the telltale heart, and I'm a romantic, and this poem is a romantic poem, and it's also dark. So it's dark and romantic. It's just a perfect poem,
And
start to finish.
it is. And on our Facebook page, Edgar Allan Poe Evermore, it seems like every week there's somebody posting something about Annabelle Lee, how something happened in their life that they could relate to it. And here again, here's Edgar Allan Poe reaching out after all these years to modern audiences and touching our heart. You know, and that's pretty amazing. Now, while we've been talking, I've noticed you've been glancing at this little box. Now, this is not Berenice, no teeth are in here, all right? But in gratitude for all that you've done for Edgar Allan Poe and for the birthday celebrations that we've been producing all these years, you've been a big supporter. Number one, I call on Kurt and say, hey, can you help out? Sure, whatever you want. I have something very special for you, something that no other restaurant in Baltimore or in any other Poe cities has. Are you ready for this? You're not sure, right? I want to present to you a piece of plaster from Poe's honeymoon suite in Petersburg, Virginia. Now, the audience can't see this, but you can actually see the horsehair and the plaster. This bluish paint is the original paint. This has not been painted over. So this particular piece came from the honeymoon suite.
Wow.
Now, I want to present this to you, first of all, because you're a great guy. You know, and you've been, again, very supportive, and I want you to have this, and maybe you can put it on display somewhere in here that the people can see. So I have a box for you, and I want to present that to you.
Well, thank you very much. That is really unbelievable, and I there aren't any words. I really appreciate this.
Well, I'm always happy to be in a position to share things like this, and to people that really deserve it.
And I will cherish it.
You better, you know. So again, when you visit Annabelle Lee Tavern, you'll have this on display someplace. Check it out. And so anyway, I think this...
well, I have something for you also. We're in the giving spirit here. I have a drink that I named for you. It's
Really?
Jeff Jerome, and it is really it's a thank you for all that you've done for the Annabelle Lee Tavern, and I hope you like it.
I'm being choked up. I've never had a cocktail named after me before. Can I taste it?
Absolutely.
Okay. What's in it? What do you know? What of course you know what the ingredients are.
It's mulled wine, which is kind of a period thing. It's warm wine with a little bit of brandy, and it's made with cardamom, cinnamon, honey, star anise.
Well, here's to Edgar Allan Poe, and here's to you. Now, I have to taste this. Kurt, this is delicious. Well, I don't want to hold up the performance, so thank you.
Thank you.
This is just really, I'm just totally blown away by this, and touches my heart. Thank you.